Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Barb Hartman from No Drama Bigfoot Group. This is legendary to see you in the Fox Den tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. Yet before we do head out, I am so thirsty. Much better, revamped, recharged, and ready to rumble. So, without further ado, it is time for Barb Hartman and myself to take a walk into the darkness. My creatures of the night, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here in the Fox Den on Star Fox Radio. Tonight, we have a good friend of mine and the North American Dogman Project, Barb Hartman, who is also a cryptid researcher, but she specializes in Sasquatch and Bigfoot and actually has her own group, which we will have a link for at the end of the show. How are you doing tonight, Barb?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's very good to finally link up and pick your mind a little bit as to what the heck is going on with these reports of strange hyena-like and canine-like cryptids occurring across the globe.
Yes, I agree. It's very, very interesting. And I've never seen a dog man, and I don't know if I'd want to see a dog man, honestly. But I know people have, right?
Yes, I'm with you on that. That would be very terrifying for sure. And I actually have not had any sort of paranormal activity myself either. I just am a journalist that has come across some, I would like to use the term groundbreaking theories and evidence that really support some historical aspects of a living creature that had relatives that do fall into the classifications of what people are reported seeing. How do you kind of feel about all that?
I think that's very interesting. But I totally agree because I feel like we have to definitely come at this from a scientific method and approach because you just have to rule out anything where a person's mind could be somewhat tricked or whatever. There's just, you have to look at all the variables. And I have the same kind of approach when I'm researching with Bigfoot and Sasquatch. You have to have that scientific approach to it.
Yes, because if you don't, then it's just unfortunately very easy for people now to take data and reports and basically build their own encounter off of that. So it is super important to make sure that we are doing our research, but also at the moment we have science on our side, which is good. We do have an environmentalist, a geologist that's working with us as well. They're both excellent. We have a master tracker. He's excellent as well. And we're trying to get some biologists on board. And we have current law enforcement as well as former law enforcement. So we're trying to cover all the odds and ends, and basically be able to have people that specialize. Hey, if this guy or this woman seems shady, let's, just have her sit down or have him sit down with some of these law enforcement, and they specialize in body language, etc. And okay, these people have some strange tracks. Well, to me, I'm not sure. Hey, Nuxium, can you sit down and check this out and figure out what these animal tracks are? And then people or say, hey, what is happening in this area? What is occurring in the forest? Then we'll approach Colleen, our environmentalist, and Nuxium, our tracker, and have them sit down with them. So we're trying to cover all the odds and ends, where if people just kind of want to brush somebody like myself aside because, as I said, I'm just an author, a journalist, researcher, that's okay. I don't feel offended by that. I then defer to the people that I have around me that specialize in that. And then after those people start to speak, it's pretty hard for people then to keep deferring away.
Right. Right. I think there's something to be said though, because a researcher and then someone that's kind of out in the field or has had experiences, that doesn't make them a researcher. Maybe they're not even interested in researching. They've just seen something that they can't explain. A lot of times people are very traumatized by their experiences. So that in itself is, kind of changes your thought process. If you see something that scares you so bad, then and you think about it, you think about it, and you think about it. The longer that it goes on, I feel the more that maybe we know that the mind kind of changes how exactly it happened. It's best to interview those people as soon as you can, right after their encounters. It's great to have a team like that of people, and I guess that's what you really need, because we don't know exactly what these things are. And so I think your group is going about this just perfectly. I agree.
Thank you. Very kind words. And I mean, I feel the same way back to you with how you approach it. It's just very important, like you said, to make sure that we're going amongst it in a proper way. And when we do have things that need to be figured out, it's important to collaborate with people. I'll give you an example. So people have wanted to say, hey, Star Fox, you're just a researcher that sits in an armchair. I mean, I get around when I can, but my response is, okay, cool. But one of my friends, Nuxium, right, master tracker, spent his whole life out in the wilderness. I've had to help him just to log on to Skype and Facebook to get his information up there. So if people like myself weren't around, people such as him that have all this great collection of information, but he's not really technologically savvy because he hasn't spent his time on computers like I have. He spent his time out in the wilderness mastering his craft. So if there weren't people out there doing that, people putting it all together where it makes sense, such as myself, then we wouldn't really be getting anywhere. And I feel like so many people kind of, what's that term, a hair across their ass or something? Like, yeah, you know what I mean? I don't like to swear, but I don't know how else to like say that.
Right. Well, that's how the saying goes. So.
Well, yes. So instead of approaching it like that, we should be sitting down and working with other organizations and working with other people that have good theories and good evidence. Yeah, everyone just wants to hide their stuff or claim that they're the only one that found that. That's not a good way to approach things. I mean, when Tyrannosaurus Rex and all these other skeletal aspects were being differentiated between Nanorex and was it the same species or a subspecies, they didn't fight about that. Some people thought, hey, it was the same. Others thought it was different. What did they do? They kept collecting data until they found a skeleton that proved it was a different species. So science doesn't work unless you sit down and collaborate. I mean, Sasquatch, Sabe, Bigfoot, Yeti, whatever terminology people would like to use, Grassman, that would never have gotten to the point it is now with science if people didn't sit down and have open minds, but also work together and show reasonings why, hey, it could be a primitive ancestor or a primitive hominoid, or it could be something to do with Gigantopithecus. Either way, they sit down to figure this out. And if people can't do that, science doesn't advance. This is why I've really tried to distance myself from any sort of quote unquote chaotic type aspects of research. I don't want it to be like that. I just want to show things that are being found. I'm not trying to convince people. I'm not trying to force feed anything. All I'm trying to show somebody is These are unknown tracks that can't be verified by specialists. People are missing here. These animals did exist. They are hardy. They probably do still potentially exist. What is happening here is all I really want people to sit down and take a look at.
Yeah, I totally agree. As a matter of fact, so I have a group on Facebook, and one of my moderators had sent me a profile. You have your entrance questions to get onto the page, and one of mine is, "Are you a believer?" And if they say no, then they're not going to get on the page because I'm not interested in proving anything to anybody. You just have to believe that there's the possibility that these
Yes.
things could exist. And I'm not at this, that group of people. We know that they exist. Plenty people have experiences. So if you're not open to that, I'm not interested in try to prove it to anybody. And that's the same thing with this. Now, I have seen Sasquatch. So I know, physically right in front of me, but I don't know what they are. And it's the same way we know that people have seen dogmen, and we know that there's different types, but we don't know exactly what they are. Now, like you said, I think it's fantastic that they're actually doing studies with DNA. Is that right, Kenny? That I believe
Yes,
that with
I've
dog,
heard some of
yeah.
that. I believe veterinarian Ketchum, she has done some sort of research, and that's another thing too that our environmentalists brought up, and actually David Paulides did as well. But Colleen was referring, she's our environmentalist, about how DNA is very good, but it's also misleading sometimes in regards of it all depends on A, what the laboratory is equipped with to look at for DNA, and B,
Hmm.
who or what is it that that individual is looking at it for DNA? Which perspective are they really analyzing this DNA sample? So a lot of times you would think DNA would be like spot on, but it really might not be because someone might be looking at it for more like human type samples, or
Hmm.
this person might be looking at it as more, ape type samples. So there's going to always kind of be a clause, I guess, in
Hmm.
what it really could be, because some of these DNA samples people have found unknown canine DNA, and others
Yes.
like Ketchum have claimed that it was primate and also hominoid, which would then potentially fall into the line of, could that be a Dinopithecus, that gargantuous baboon werewolf looking type creature that did exist? Now, did that come up on the land bridge? Yet also hyenas, though, like we were speaking about, hyenas aren't related to canine or cats. They're kind of a tweener, but if you had to pick one, they're more closely related to felines than they are canines. So if someone was to do a DNA sample on that, again, it would depend on what they're going to be looking for, because that's not going to come back as either
Right.
or.
Hmm.
And now also, if you look at dogs, so people report in a lot of dogman type encounters that these things will try the doors, etc. All
Hmm.
right, if you look at dogs, like a foot of a dog, it doesn't really have too much dexterity in the paw. I mean, it tries to use it, but it's not even close to as well adapted as, say, a cat or something. And also, if you look at the fifth digit, which
Hmm.
almost every animal on Earth, mammal, has a fifth digit, whales, etc. But if you look on the back where the canine's fifth digit is, it's almost useless.
Yes. Right.
Yes, it's not going to
Hmm.
re-evolve. It's evolved
Yes.
to be, yes, okay. So now if
Hmm.
you look at a hyena, though, a hyena's front paw actually kind of has like an opposable thumb almost off to the side of it. Their front
Oh,
paws are different than their back paws. They're also
okay.
much longer. So evolution now, potentially, this is all in theory, potentially
Yes. Hmm.
that could evolve to be more useful, where it could use it more to grip things and pick things up. And if you look at how bears move, all right, a lot of people think that we're are trying to push the aspect of this is just some raging quote unquote Hollywood werewolf that is super comfortable bipedally all the time.
Hmm.
That's not really truthful in my opinion, because from the majority of the reports that I've done, that I've also read, spoken to other individuals, these animals are quadrupedal and bipedal, meaning
Mm-hmm.
if they go back and forth, and in the majority of the tracks that do have more than just one, you can see these track patterns where it's going down and then up. Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of these reports, people are only seeing it quick where it's dashing across the road. So they could
Mm-hmm.
be catching it where it's already pushed itself up with its momentum onto its back legs and it's just jutting across the road. Because when these things do go away, when people see them for longer than a couple seconds, they're running and then, like I said, using that momentum with their front arms and pushing themselves up. So if people look at a bear, same thing, bears have shorter back legs, longer front arms. Bears aren't really necessarily super comfortable on their back legs, but then what do? They use that momentum and they push themselves up. Okay. So,
Yes.
yes. And now when a bear is standing up, does it not look more menacing than when it does on all fours? So, if it
Right.
needs to intimidate something now,
Yeah.
it's up bipedally. So
Yeah.
now it's
Right.
like, "Arr." And
Mhm.
again, same thing with my squirrel. My squirrel, she gets up, she twirls around on her back two legs when she's waiting for a peanut. She jumps up and down and walks towards me on her back legs. Yes,
Mhm.
she's not
Oh.
fully comfortable walking bipedally, but what I'm trying to get at is that animals can get up bipedally, and also squirrels have hands like raccoons and stuff. Same thing,
Mhm.
like their front arms are have big kind of like rat type like or feet.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so they can support themselves like that. But okay, so the dogmen, what we think is when they're running, they got the longer arms, they're using that momentum, they'll push themselves up. So same
Mhm.
thing. Okay, if a bear wants to look more menacing up on two legs, well, now obviously if a dogman does have opposable thumbs that they could potentially be using to pick up things, wouldn't it now look more menacing to push itself up, and it can look in your window now, and it could be
Yes.
using that hand to try something and pick it up? Because again, hyenas are smart. People think that animals are not intellectual. Raccoons can learn how to open doors and things. I believe it's after like a couple of months their mind kind of resets, which is funny, but you can teach them again. But it's literally like they just wake up one day and they forget. But you can reteach them everything, so they're super
Yeah.
smart. More or less, people don't understand the intelligence of animals. Gorillas have been spotted in areas where people poach, showing other gorillas in their pride how to get rid of traps and slowing down the
Oh.
young ones because they know a trap is up here. And also, again, look at saltwater crocodiles. I use this example. People are like, oh, reptiles aren't that smart. Saltwater crocodiles are super smart. They tell people no matter where you are, do not go down to the water at the same time in the same area every day. You need to switch it up, switch different sides, different time frames, because
Oh.
they learn your tactics. They learn when you're going to come down, and they wait
Uh-huh.
there and they ambush you. And when
Oh,
they look at
wow.
a skeleton and the setup of the brain from ancient saltwater crocodiles to crocodiles now, it's literally identical. It hasn't changed because of how perfect of a predator it
Mm.
is. And
Yes.
if that's not a form of intelligence, I don't really know what is. Just because it doesn't
Right.
pick up a cell phone and text on it,
Yeah.
the fact that it can learn behavior like that
Right.
shows you intellect. I mean,
Mhm.
so again, it really falls into the aspect when people are saying that they see these things looking in their windows
Yes.
or trying to open up doors. Yes, it's a lot to think about, but there are a lot of theories and credit supporting
Yeah.
potentially extinct animals that might not be extinct, and they are continuously finding animals that they thought have been extinct that actually aren't. And we don't know anything about the cave systems. We know less about cave systems than we do outer space and the ocean, and we know absolutely nothing about those either. So no one goes into these cave systems where people are missing. And as I
Mhm.
stated to you earlier, in Saudi Arabia, they found that cave system, the Smithsonian, with hundreds of thousands of human and animal bones deep in
Yeah.
the cave from these hyenas. Okay, it doesn't take a genius to understand that cave systems all across the country,
Mhm. That
cave
certainly.
systems, missing people, cave systems, cave
Yes.
hyenas, and other animals did exist at one point in time. Cave systems also attached to abandoned mine shafts and all kinds of other areas, and they potentially could travel from all across the United States. You could, in theory, go into a cave system in Maine that who knows, it might pop you out in California. So animals
Right.
use areas for a path of least resistance. And we do know animals have existed that lived in cave systems. So, what is occurring here? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because this as we look at maps of missing persons and sightings, it matches up perfectly with the cave systems. And so I think that's a really good point that people really should be investigating the cave systems much more. I think it's just you don't know when you're getting in you're going underground. And so is there some sort of, is the air is a human able to go down into these caves? I think there's animal can fit through a spot that a human can't necessarily, right? So I think that they could be also taking their bodies and maybe going into, into these like smaller areas, kind of just squish their bodies through. But it's really, I think that's a perfect thing. And I think the same thing with Sasquatch. I definitely think that they're using the cave system. As a matter of fact, there is a woman in Illinois that you had spoken with her, maybe Deborah. And
Yes.
yes, and she found out that behind her, she lives, there's cornfields. There is a mound that she talked to a local farmer, and he said, yeah, I'm not able to plant there because that's actually was attached to a coal mine. So there's a lot of coal dust and, it's been decommissioned because whatever. She said that these things that she's seeing there coming out of the ground, well, it would be perfect for them to, as you said, they could be traveling from a local park that's maybe 20 miles away and where they're living and people are seeing them. Why wouldn't they use this underground cave system and say, hey, let's go over and go to the cornfield and get some corn? I mean, it makes perfect sense. They can travel and undetected. You can't really detect them if they're deep into the cave system, right? So I think I think that's a really good theory. And I was not aware, as far as like you're saying about the hyena that was discovered and the cave system in Saudi Arabia. I was not aware of that, and I think that is so fascinating as far as to possibly connect that to Dogman, because we have had so many reports of people saying that the thing that they saw looks like a hyena. I think it's an interesting route to take. Yeah, so I just think it's fascinating. Now, I did have a question though, that are there different types of dogmen, do you believe? Are there different variants?
All right, so before I answer that, real quick, Deborah, yeah, she reported that hers would look like hyenas, and she found these strange
Yes.
burrows all over her property. So just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, think for 1 second, like I said, just in the dens that scientists have been able to get into, because people don't realize a hyena pack or pride, whatever they're called, they're going to reuse these dens over and over again in their family groups unless another pride or pack of hyenas pushes them out or
Okay.
there's human encroachment. So very few hyena dens have been able to be explored because they're always in consistent use.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
the ones that have been explored went down at least 7 feet into the ground. So, like you
Wow.
just said, if something's digging a 7 foot tunnel burrow into the ground and it connected into a cave system, then they're able to, yeah, just move and actually get around quite easily. And
Yes.
people don't realize how enormous hyenas are. Yeah, there's different variants, but hyenas are big boys and girls. They're huge. And some of the images like you had seen earlier that I sent you,
Uh-huh.
they're not small. And when people are reporting seeing something that large, yeah, especially like a cave hyena, it could really fall into that category. And now to answer your question, yeah, there are some different variations that potentially have been seen. So when you look at the historical aspects of the cynocephaly, that was spoken about by Herodotus and Alexander the Great and a lot of other ancient peoples, and also Christopher Columbus. And there's a lot of aspects of that that's really solidified that that was a living type entity
Right.
that does either still exist or did at one point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And now you also have people that claim they see what looks to be like a bear man or a bearzilla or etc. Now you have to look at that as okay, could that just be really a large grizzly bear? Could that be a Sasquatch? Could that now also be the Gugway, which could
Mm-hmm.
potentially be a Dinopithecus, which is that enormous baboon looking werewolf type
Yes.
ape creature? It
Right.
literally would have pointed ears, but it would have that
Mm-hmm.
long snout that would look like a werewolf, and it would have crazy teeth and would have a big mane too, where people are reporting seeing these manes. And some of the other ones people have seen claim it looks more like a wolf, but they're not really necessarily seeing them up close. So again, like you said, people got to understand when you're terrified and such, when you're seeing things, if you did just see a massive hyena or something, yeah, that could look like a massive wolf with a mane,
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I try to approach it as some, I guess, the direct descriptions, because everyone could describe something different to an extent. It's kind of like when you see something in the clouds and you see something and I see
Yeah.
something. Yeah, we could be looking at a dog and it's
Right.
still the same dog, but you could potentially think the dog maybe looks a little sleeker, and I could be like, I don't know, it doesn't look too sleek. It looks pretty, girthy or something.
Right.
It's just the way it is, how our minds work. So
Mhm.
so there are a ton of different variations. Yeah, I mean, you have your hyena type, which we believe is the cave hyenas, and then you have your baboon type, which we believe is potentially the Dinopithecus, which what is going on. And then you have some people that say coyote man, jackal man.
Jack.
Yeah, a coyote and jackal would kind of look potentially similar. And coyote man is actually referred to a ton down in Arizona, and some of the indigenous cultures report that a lot, which is, it seems to be more like a skinwalker that is on all
Yes.
fours, not necessarily up on bipedalness. But then you have the bear man as well. So yeah, there's some different variations. Yeah, again, like I said, people's descriptions of things are always going to kind of be different. So think though, a massive baboon, could that not look like a quote unquote bear man? Like that's just completely covered with
Sure.
that massive mane and hair, and it's got his face and
Yes.
it's growling at you with that. Could that not maybe look like a bear man now? And then, like I said,
Yeah.
with the hyenas with a mane, yeah, could that not look like a wolf with a mane? So I try to understand, hey, okay, there's some historical references here. So the ape cat, for example, Klickitat ape cat, well, the Amphicenoidae was neither canine nor bear. It was a tweener, but it was really sleek and kind of had the agility of like a cat, but it had back legs that were shorter than its front legs. And it could also, from its skeletal remains, scientists are pretty optimistic it could be bipedal as well as quadrupedal pretty simply. So
Right.
I believe there are ancestors that have come into play in this. But now to fully turn and answer your question with a 360-degree answer, the last aspect is yes, the alphabet boys have been messing around with experimentation since
Yes.
at least World War One, give or take. I mean, Stalin was trying to create an
Yes.
ape army.
Right.
Hitler and the rest of the Nazis were trying to create dog type people and goat people, and were doing all kinds of disturbing aspects with the occult. You
Right.
have Plum Island. You have all these aspects that just really show you the experimental aspect. I mean, you have Lauren Donaldson and Dr. Barr that admitted during the Manhattan Project that they were experimenting on apex predators at a specific military facility up in like Washington that was highly remote. And ever since then, people have reported seeing what looks like a Klickitat ape cat. So yes, now I do believe that obviously the alphabet boys have messed around with some sort of DNA with things. I mean, it's no different than the news article I read the other day where scientists were trying to experiment on mice, which is just terrible. But either way,
Yeah.
they started growing body parts in areas they weren't supposed to.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
messed up.
Yeah.
So either way,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to point at is that we know
Right.
these type of experiments and behaviors are occurring, and we do know that they are botched sometimes. So what, in theory, why would not something they were working on potentially be botched, but they could still also let it out? And a lot of people don't realize there was, I believe it was back in the 40s, the Philadelphia Project, where there's a lot of actual evidence supporting that the Alphabet Boys were able to get a battleship or destroyer, I believe, to teleport from one area to another. And now think of that, if that's back then in the
Right.
40s,
Right.
what could
Yeah.
we be doing
Yes.
now in 2024?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that quantum physics, which comes into play, quantum mechanics, that's definitely not something that is I feel that we give enough credence to when we're researching, when we're doing research on this. And it really is something that needs to be, well, and also you have to recognize, I think, this is what I think is so fantastic about you and researchers like you. Okay, maybe you're not out every day, looking for these things, boots on the ground, but you are so knowledgeable in trying to determine what are these things. We know that they exist, but what are they? And you have to add all this historical aspect of it. It has to be added in. It has to be factored in. What do you think, Kenny, about the ones that they say, and I've talked to a couple people, they said it almost looks like a German Shepherd head. I think what would be
No,
the
you're
other,
correct. German Shepherd
yeah,
Husky type like head.
right? Yeah,
There was
yeah. What
actually a
about
report of
those?
that in Canada recently where a young
Okay.
boy was completely shredded. He survived, but he had to be
Oh,
airlifted where he was
oh
attacked
my
by some
gosh.
sort of husky looking German Shepherd like creature.
Uh-huh.
Again, I think that would fall into probably the alphabet boys just doing a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
experimentation on stuff
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
there is that case with the Nazis where they went down in that town hall that they found and like there was actually people with their heads cut off, but there were animal
Oh,
heads that had been placed on top of them.
yes. Oh,
And this
so
is
terrible.
this yes, so this is World War II, and they were trying
Mhm.
these things. And there's old Russian videos too from World War One where they had taken like a smaller dog's head and put it on a larger dog's head, and it lived
Yeah.
for like so yeah, it's twisted stuff. But the moral of the story is that this type of stuff has been occurring, and
Mhm.
this is back in the like almost 100 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe more, give or
Yeah.
take. So think of how advanced now things
Yes.
are occurring.
Yeah.
And I mean, if Lauren Donaldson was able to make the Donaldson trout, which can live in salt water, fresh water, cold water, warm water, okay,
Mhm.
why, in theory, would you not be able to, yes, experiment on something else and get some sort of different variation? So I think
Mhm.
that does play a lot into maybe some of the variants people are seeing.
Okay,
And
that makes
to
sense.
actually blow your mind for a second too, this will be a little as we tie this up, just an example. So you are a big Sasquatch researcher,
Mhm.
and you must have heard about potentially some of the spectral Sasquatches or the ghostly looking ones. Well, I was
Mhm.
speaking to some indigenous people about some of the things that could be occurring with Dogmen, and actually a few of the gentlemen had some really great information for me and were telling me that they believe that their ancestors and some of these relatives of theirs and also early settlers were seeing actual Sasquatch, but they were seeing them in the fog of the mountain and they were afraid of them. So they thought that they were ghostly, but in actuality, they were living things such as you and I,
Mhm.
but they were in the fog. So they would look
Okay, yeah.
ghostly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just wanted to
That
share
makes
that
sense.
with
Oh,
you.
that totally makes sense in the way that they're able to camouflage. It's just it would make sense that they would think, oh, they can disappear, you know?
Well, think how
That
quickly a
yeah.
person could disappear
Oh
into
yeah.
fog.
Mhm.
I mean, let's for a second take just a highly trained, maybe assassin or a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger, someone that is literally specialized in that. How quickly
Mhm.
do you think they could disappear in and out of foliage around you and I, or in and out of fog or areas where we would not even know where they are? I mean, look at how
Absolutely.
ninjas used to attack,
Yeah.
like the samurais and things. I mean,
Right,
it's
right.
proven you would have these special elite people that
Mhm.
would literally come into areas and be undetectable. Okay.
Right.
And these are people, and not saying that people can't be stealthy, but now when it comes to animals, animals' whole survivals are based off of stealth.
Exactly, exactly. And they don't have that, like you said, that is their survival. That's how they acquire food. That's how they reproduce. That's how they keep themselves safe. And that is all that they concentrate on. So these skills that humans, we don't have those skills because, we're pretty safe typically. Four walls and a roof over your head. We don't have to worry about what animals do. And this is all that they have to do. It's imperative that they keep themselves safe and they keep themselves hidden. It makes perfect sense, that they could acquire skills that remain hidden. And of course, they're going to explore every avenue available to them. So the cave system would be perfect. Why wouldn't they do that?
It's a free place to live. It's outside of the
Mhm.
elements. I mean, ancient people used to do that. And
Mhm.
also, just recently, they've seen different ape species that are using spears and things to get fish in the water because they don't like to get in the water themselves. People
Yeah.
completely underestimate, like you said, the intellect of what it takes to
Mhm.
survive. And no, I totally appreciate you popping in tonight and
Of
giving some thought
course.
as
That
to
was
what's
great.
occurring with all this.
Anytime. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I want to learn more about Dogman because as you know, I interview people of all, that have had all kinds of experiences, and I'm so glad to learn about the hyena because that is not something that I was aware of, and the developments of that in respect to potential Dogman. So that's great because that really gives me something to think about when I'm talking to people. Gives me some information to give them.
Yeah, no, I
So,
definitely would love to
no,
get you on here again when you get some free time. And
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, just recently as well, they found a hyena that was the size of a polar bear and another species that
Wow.
was almost the size of a rhino. So these
Wow.
ancestors did exist, and
Mhm.
people should really definitely take at least a 360 look as to what's occurring and
Yes.
not just be so
Yeah.
close-minded to it.
Before we go, can you just explain to me, when people say when they find the different tracks, what about a three-toed, a lot of the three-toed tracks? Do you think that that is Dogman or do you think that's something else? And why do you think that they're finding those? Yeah.
So the three-toed, that's a really great question. Nuxium has sat down a few times and looked at some of those, and when you step into the mud and dirt and etc., it could potentially smudge some of your feet together or some of your tracks together, and also in snow and things.
Mhm.
And one of the big issues, like he stresses, is people are focusing so much just on one track, which we need to see more than that. We need to see the next track. We need to see the next track after that. Then we can figure out, is it really bipedal or is this a quadrupedal animal? What is the area looking like? Where did this come out of the brush? What type of terrain is this? Just being able to understand, because with snow and sand and moisture, things expand and contrast. So a definition of a track really in those type of elements can be misjudged, whereas when you get a track in a really really hard surface like volcanic type areas, something has to be girthy just to even make an impression on there. And some of those three track ones, actually Nuxium was able to debunk two of them, where it was a blue herring, and you could see
Oh.
when it was jumping, like hop, 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 because he was like,
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense for this to be bipedal here, because it would have been stepping over here and here. He goes, this, no, he goes, this looks like it was hopping. And then he realizes the blue herring's in the area. He's able to look at his tracks of the blue herring, and it matches up kind of with like the three type claws in the
Mhm.
front in the snow where it was hopping down. But
Okay.
then there are a couple other tracks though that are potentially looking like it's got the three claws, but again, they're in muddy type like surfaces, and there's
Mhm.
also not other tracks to be shown. So it's really hard, I guess, to know definitively if it is really three tracked
Mhm.
or three toed, or if it's just looking like that because moisture has contrasted that or expanded that, or is it just a bird or something that is making it look like that.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
I totally appreciate that. And like I said, we will get you on here again soon and
Great.
pick your mind. And I definitely need more credence on what we're doing. So
Awesome. Thanks again for having me. It's been great.
Thank you for everyone who stopped by tonight for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you did enjoy this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm. And until next time, stay safe out there.